Chapter 10, Salk and Oppenheimer. I'm supposed to do a report on a famous historical figure, but instead of choosing from the likely suspects, William Shakespeare, Thomas Jefferson, Harriet Tubman, I use my computer to look up the names my grandfather's been batting around: Galileo, Jonas Salk, Robert Oppenheimer. Galileo's picture is an old oil painting, like something that should be hanging in the De Young Museum in San Francisco. He's dressed like he's in a Shakespeare play and doesn't seem like a real person. But Salk and Oppenheimer are interesting. Salk looks exactly the way you'd imagine a scientist: glasses, white lab coat, holding test tubes. Nerdy in general. Oppenheimer is more unexpected. He's handsome with piercing eyes. He stares broodingly into a camera like an old Hollywood actor. In one shot, he's wearing a hat and has a cigarette dangling from his mouth. I can almost imagine my dad playing his part in a movie. Also, Oppenheimer has a local connection to the Bay Area. He taught at the University of California at Berkeley. My mom is always raving about the theater program there. I can't help but notice a similarity between the two men. They are both involved in wars where science played a big part in the outcome. Jonas Salk in the war on polio, Robert Oppenheimer in World War II. Salk found a vaccine that prevented polio, and Oppenheimer helped create the bombs that were dropped on Japan and ended the war. Oppenheimer's story seems like a Hollywood movie. The race against the Germans to create the bomb first. And then there's the photo of one of the bombs exploding with a big mushroom cloud. There's a quote from Oppenheimer, his reaction to the successful testing of the atomic bomb. We knew the world would not be the same. A few people laughed. A few people cried. Most people were silent. I understood how he felt, like when my grandfather walked through the front door looking like a teenager. Science fiction becoming reality. My mom talks about how she couldn't even have imagined cell phones when she was a kid, and now everyone has them. Except me, of course. My parents say I'm too young. My grandfather comes into my bedroom without knocking. He freezes when he sees the handprints. Good grief, what happened to your walls? They're supposed to look this way, I explain. That's a style? Whatever happened to nice wallpaper? He points to his face. He's totally breaking out. He's got zits on his forehead and a big red one on his chin. Do you have any acne cream? There's some in the bathroom, I tell him, and he follows me in. I can't believe I'm 76 years old and dealing with pimples again, he grumbles. I dig through a drawer, find a tube, and hand it to him. He smears some cream on his zits. Maybe next time I'll find a cure for acne, he says. We order Chinese takeout again for dinner. My mom wanted to order sushi, but my grandfather said the person who has the most degrees should get to choose. Since he has 2 PhDs, he won. As we eat, I find myself observing my grandfather and mother like I'm a scientist, an Ellie version of Galileo. For one thing, our whole seating arrangement is different. When it's just my mom and me, we sit next to each other. But my grandfather sits at the head of the counter like he's the king. Then there's where they talk to each other, or rather, don't talk to each other. My grandfather grills my mom with questions, and I can tell she finds them annoying. Does she still have her college transcripts? Would she like to meet a friend of his in the Stanford biology department to talk about the program? Would she like his help in applying? She answers him the first few times, but after a while she stops and just looks at her plate, the way a teenager would. I have a sudden realization. Even though my mom's a grown-up with her own life, my grandfather still treats her like a little kid. After we finish dinner, I pass out the fortune cookies. My grandfather doesn't look very happy as he reads his fortune. What does yours say? I ask him. You are going to have some new clothes, he says. Not a bad idea, Dad. Maybe we could get you some clothes with a little style. You look like you shop in the old man department. I can drive you to the mall, my mom offers. There's nothing wrong with my clothes. They're brand new. I just bought them a few weeks ago after I turned young. To me, he says, I had to because I shrank. He turns to my mother. But now that you mention it, I do need to borrow the car, Melissa. My mom jokes. Borrow the car? I thought you gave up driving. He gives her a look. Things have changed. I have an errand to run. Well, you can't drive my car, she replies slowly. You're not old enough. He sits up to his full height. I certainly am old enough. Would you like to see my driver's license? Dad, she says, her tone placating, what would happen if you got stopped? You don't exactly look like your driver's license. She's right. With his zits and his long hair falling out of my ponytail holder, he barely looks old enough to get into a PG-13 movie. I won't get stopped. I remember how you drive. You always try to pass from the right lane, she says with a groan. I get more swing that way, he says. Simple physics. You're going to end up in an accident. His gaze hardens. Accident? You want to talk about accidents? Who was the one who wrecked the Volkswagen? Who wrapped it around a tree? It wasn't my fault, she stammers. It was raining, the road was slick, it was dark. I just paid that car off. They stare at each other like bulls in the ring. I need to borrow the car, he says. My mom won't let him borrow the car. Do you have any idea how many times she borrowed my car? He rants on the bus ride to school. He's furious. Why don't you just ask her to drive you, I suggest. She won't drive me to the lab, he says. The rent-a-cop told her he'd press charges if he saw me on the premises again. Oh, I say. I see his point. But on the bus after school, his mood is completely different. He seems almost happy, excited even. When we reach our stop, he doesn't get off. Come on, this is us, I tell him. He doesn't move. We're getting off at a different stop today. We are? Where? His eyes gleam. My lab.